The whip cracked and the sound split the desert like lightning. Mira jolted upright in the burning dust, her breath shaking in her chest. The Texas sun hammered down so hard it felt personal, like the sky itself wanted her gone. Jade Pike's wagon rolled away without slowing, its wheels carving deep grooves in the powdery road. He didn't look back, he never would. Behind her, a hawk screamed over the empty plain. Ahead, nothing but shimmering heat. She held her small cloth bundle tight and started walking because stopping meant dying. But as the ground wavered beneath her bare, cracked feet, one terrible question pushed through her exhaustion. How far can a woman go when the world decides she's worth nothing? The trail stretched across the red earth like an old scar. Mira had followed it since sunrise, her steps slow, stubborn, and shaking. The hem of her calico dress snagged on thorn brush as she pushed forward. Every time she blinked, the sun carved new sparks across her vision. Her mother had always warned her, "Mija, your skin tells two stories. Some folks will read the wrong one and they'll read it with hate." Mira didn't need reminding. Jade Pike had made sure of that. Her tin of water was gone before noon. The last sip had tasted of warm metal. Now her mouth felt thick and useless. Her cracked lips strung every time the hot wind blew. The dry heat tugged at her like invisible hands, trying to shake loose whatever strength she had left. Still she walked. Fear came with her, silent and sharp. Out here, every rattling stone was danger, every shadow a pair of eyes. She kept one hand near her boot, where a small skinning knife rested against her ankle. Her mother had pressed it into her palm before dying, fingers trembling with fever. "Never let them think you're helpless," she had whispered. By late morning of the second day, Mira could barely hold her head up. The desert flickered in strange waves. Her legs moved only because she willed them to. The trail split into two faint paths, and she stared at them for a long moment, unable to tell which was real. Then she saw it. A roof flat, brown, low to the ground, smoke curling from a crooked chimney, a way station, not salvation, but maybe water. Her pulse fluttered weakly with hope. The place sagged like a tired animal. A small corral held 3 bony horses. Laughter leaked out from inside, rough, sharp laughter that scraped the nerves raw, but thirst pressed harder than fear. Mira pushed open the warped door. The smell hit her first. Stale whiskey, sweat, and old anger. 4 trail-worn men looked up from a half-empty bottle. Their laughter died. The silence inside the cramped room thickened. "Well now," one said, wiping his greasy beard with the back of his hand. "Wind sure blows strange things in today." Her voice worked only because her life depended on it. "Water, please, I can pay." She held out a tiny knotted cloth with 3 coins inside. Another man rose, blocking the doorway behind her. His shoulders filled the room. He smelled of whiskey and unwashed skin. "We got water," he said, stepping closer. "Got other things too." Her heart thudded painfully. "Just water, sir." "Night gets cold," he murmured, reaching for her arm. "BNS warm, haze soft. I'll keep you company." Laughter rippled behind him. His hand clamped onto her wrist. Iron choking final. No escape out the front. No help. No mercy. Her mind screamed. Her free hand moved faster than she thought possible. She pulled the knife from her boot and slashed upward. A bright streak of blood jumped across his knuckles. He roared and jerked back. She didn't wait. Mira bolted through the back door into the blinding light. Shouts exploded behind her. "Get her." She ran into a thorny maze of brush, her skirt tearing, her breath stabbing her throat. Branches scratched her arms. Stones bit her feet. She didn't dare look back, not once. She ran until sound blurred, until the sky spun, until her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed in a dry ravine scattered with pale stones. The knife slipped from her fingers. The world tilted, drained of color. Her last thought was of water, cool water, and then the darkness swept her under. A horse snorted above her. Boots slid down the rocky slope with quiet purpose. A shadow knelt beside her. Broad shoulders, worn chaps, a man who moved like someone carved from long roads and harder years. Ronan Hale touched 2 fingers to her throat. Her pulse fluttered weakly. His face didn't change, but something softened in his winter-cold eyes. He lifted his canteen and wet a square of cloth. Gently he pressed it to her cracked lips. She stirred barely. Leaving her wasn't an option. Not for a man like him. Ronan slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and one arm beneath her knees. She weighed almost nothing. He settled her in front of him on his buckskin mare, her head leaning weakly against his coat. The horse turned east toward the distant rise of a lonely homestead. Ronan held the reins with one hand and her small, exhausted body with the other. His jaw was set, his expression unreadable, but inside a familiar heaviness stirred. The world had taken much from him already. He would not let it take her. Mira awoke to the scent of pine and firewood. Soft light filtered through a window without glass. She lay on a narrow cut beneath a wool blanket. The room was simple: log walls, a stone hearth, a table with 2 chairs, no decorations, no softness, a place built by necessity, not comfort. Her knife rested on a crate beside the cot. Cleaned, not taken. Her throat tightened with uncertainty. She rose on shaky legs, looking around. The cabin felt lonely, carved from silence. She found a twig broom in a corner and began sweeping, trying to steady her pounding heart. Order helped. Work helped. Work meant worth. In the pantry she discovered flour, cornmeal, beans, and a small hidden pouch of spices that smelled like her mother's kitchen. Chilies, cumin, oregano. A slow warmth filled her chest. She built a fire, set beans to boil, mixed cornmeal with water and salt. Her hands found the old rhythm. Pat, turn, pat, shaping tortillas over the flame. By dusk, the little cabin smelled like life itself. Footsteps approached outside. The door creaked open. Ronan stepped inside and froze. Light from the hearth brushed across Mira's face as she turned, tortilla in hand. She looked fragile but standing, afraid but determined. The table was set for 2. They stared at each other, neither speaking. He washed at the basin, sat down and waited. She brought the meal. They ate in a silence broken only by the crackling fire and the chorus of evening crickets. But when Ronan tasted the beans, his hand paused mid-bite. Just a slight pause, but enough to show something inside him had shifted. When the plates were empty, he finally looked at her. "What's your name?" "Mira, sir." He studied her for a long, quiet moment. "Where are you from?" She hesitated, then told the truth. "My mother was Mexican. My father was a colored soldier." The words trembled in the air. She braced for disgust, but Ronan's face didn't change. "You can stay," he said simply. "Few days till you're strong." Her relief nearly broke her. She swallowed hard. "I ain't white, sir, but I can cook." He held her gaze. "That's enough for now." A fragile beginning, a small light in a brutal world, the first spark of everything that would come next. Morning crept into the cabin on quiet feet. Pale light spilled across the wooden floor, catching the lingering scent of last night's beans. Mira opened her eyes slowly, her body still aching from heat, fear, and miles of desert. But she wasn't on the ground anymore. A blanket covered her, a roof shielded her, a cup of water sat beside her cot. It felt unreal. Ronan Hale was nowhere in sight. The cabin hummed with the kind of silence that belonged to a man who lived alone and had learned not to expect footsteps but his own. Mira pushed herself upright. She would not sit idle. That was a rule she'd learned early. If they see you as a burden, you won't last long. She folded the blanket, swept the floor again, and checked the fire. Then she moved outside to the narrow porch. The morning wind was sharp, carrying the smell of dust and pine. In the distance, the land spread wide and empty. Gold grass, red earth, sky like a pale blue lid. A simple ranch sat nearby, a fenced corral, a sagging shed, a buckskin mare standing patient and silent. Ronan had saved her, fed her, given her a cot instead of the ground. That alone settled her in ways she didn't fully understand. She stepped back inside, breathing deep. She needed to cook. Cooking steadied her. Cooking made sense of the world. By the time Ronan returned from checking fence lines, the cabin smelled warm and alive again. Fresh cornbread pooling by the window, beans simmering low, and tortillas resting beneath a cloth. He stopped in the doorway. His hat hung low over his eyes. But the surprise in his stillness was unmistakable. "You've been busy," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," Mira answered, lowering her gaze. "Hope it's all right." He washed in the basin without another word. The silence stretched thin but not unfriendly. They ate together again, still wordless, steady. Halfway through the meal, Ronan finally broke the quiet. "You fix things," he murmured. Mira's hands froze on her fork. "So this house been quiet too long? You put breath back in it." Her throat tightened. She looked down, afraid a wrong expression would shatter the moment. Ronan cleared his plate and pushed back from the table. "Come outside when you're done." She washed the dishes quickly, nerves prickling along her spine. When she joined him on the porch, he stood leaning against a post, arms crossed, eyes on the horizon. "You're safe here," he said, "as long as you need." The wind rustled through the grass. Mira clasped her hands together to stop them trembling. "I'll earn it," she whispered. "I'll work." "You already are." The words weren't gentle or soft. They were plain and solid, as if he were statting the weather. But the certainty in them warmed her more than any kindness had in years. That week passed like a slow sunrise. Mira swept the cabin each morning, tended the fire, boiled beans, baked bread, and mended Ronan's shirts with stitches so small they looked like the work of a machine. She found an abandoned patch of dirt behind the cabin and began working the soil with her bare hands. When she found a rusted hoe in the shed, she fixed the handle and dug trenches for seeds. Ronan watched from a distance. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were thin and measured, but something in his quiet softened. Mira felt it, not in touch or tone, but in the way he lingered by the doorway, in how he walked slower when she worked outside, in how his eyes rested on her a heartbeat longer than before. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they stood on the porch together. The sky burned orange, the land stretched wide and breathing. Ronan lifted his chin toward the ridge. Storm blew through that pass once, he said. Lightning took the cabin I had before this one. Mira turned to him, her heart tightening. My wife and boy were inside. The wind paused, even the world seemed to hold still. He didn't look at her, didn't need to. His voice carried the years. I rebuilt, but part of me stayed in that fire. Mira swallowed hard. Her voice barely found its way out. I'm sorry, sir, he nodded once. Some things just are, and yet she felt it. The air between them shifted. A new thread tied them, barely visible but strong. Pain recognized pain, loss recognized loss. Days warmed into weeks. Mira's garden sprouted its first shoots. The mare whinnied when she approached. The cabin felt less like a hollow box of wood and more like a heartbeat, but something else grew too, something neither spoke aloud. When Mira cooked, Ronan watched her hands. When Ronan came in from work, Mira watched the dust settle along his jaw. Their silences filled not with fear, but with a question neither dared voice. Then came the storm. Dark clouds rolled in fast from the north. The wind snapped like a whip. Mira hurried to secure the shutters, but the gale tore them open again. Rain hammered the cabin walls and cold air knifed through the window frame. Ronan grabbed a heavy tarp. Help me. They fought the wind together, struggling to hold the canvas against the frame. The storm roared like a living thing. Mira's hair whipped across her face, her dress soaked and clinging tight. The tarp jerked hard, shoving her backward. The porchboards turned slick beneath her boots. She slipped, her breath catching as her feet slid out from under her. Ronan lunged, his hand closed over hers. Firm, warm, protective. Her entire body went still. Lightning lit the sky behind them, turning everything white. In that flash, she saw the look on his face. Not duty, not pity, something deeper. The world shrank to the space between their hands. Mira felt a jolt run up her arm. Sharp, electric, terrifying. She had never been touched without threat, never held without fear. His grip tightened, steadying her. For the first time in years, her body didn't brace for danger. It leaned toward safety. Ronan released her slowly, as if unsure of himself. The storm howled around them, but their silence was louder. They secured the tarp, soaking and breathless, then stood facing each other on the porch, the rain pounding just beyond the overhang. Neither spoke, but everything had changed. When they returned inside, Mira's hand shook as she stoked the fire. Ronan moved past her, the air between them thick with something warm and unnameable. That night neither slept well. Mira lay awake, listening to the rain and replaying the feel of his hand over hers. Strength without threat, warmth without claim. It terrified her more than the desert ever had. Outside, Ronan stood beneath the porch roof, staring into the storm with whiskey burning in his throat. His chest edged with memories he buried deep. But tonight, something new rose through the ashes. Mira, her touch, her quiet strength. He meant to shut it out, but he couldn't, not anymore. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the land washed clean and shining. But inside the cabin, nothing felt settled. Every movement carried a new awareness. Quiet, careful, charged. Ronan kept his distance that morning. He worked the fences with more force than needed. His burned-out grief and fresh confusion mixing until his jaw stayed clenched and his eyes stayed low. Mira felt the shift like a change in wind direction. She moved softly around the cabin, unsure how to breathe in this new space between them. Still, life resumed its rhythm. She gathered herbs in the thin morning light, fed the horses, checked the tender shoots in the garden. But even in the simplest work, her mind kept replaying that moment on the porch, his hand covering hers, the storm lighting his face, the fierce protectiveness she'd seen in his eyes. By noon, she could hardly steady her breaths. And then riders came. A cloud of red dust rose on the horizon, shimmering through the heat. Mira froze. A basket of herbs clutched against her chest. Horses, 3 of them, men she didn't recognize at first, but the swagger in their shoulders made her stomach twist. Ronan stepped out of the stable, wiping his hands on a rag, his whole frame tightened. The men approached the yard at an arrogant trot, dust swirling behind them. Their leader, a big man named Clive Rowan, slid off his saddle with a smirk. 2 other ranch hands followed close behind. Ronan, Clive drawled herd talk. You got a spare gelling for sale, might, Ronan said, voice flat. Depends on who's buying. Clive's eyes shifted. Slow, mean to Mira. Well now, he said, lips curling. Ain't you a sight? Didn't know you took on new help. The 2 men behind him chuckled. Mira stood very still. The basket trembled in her hands. Clive took a step toward her. Where'd you find this one, Ronan? She looked such you plucked her off a sugar road down south. His words dripped with insult. Heat rose in Mira's throat. Shame, fear, familiar, unwelcome. Leave her be, Ronan said. But Clive didn't stop. He reached his thick hand toward her hip, slow, mocking, like she wasn't even human. And then the sound cut the air like a thunderclap. Click. Ronan's Colt was out. Hammer drawn, muzzle centered on Clive's chest. It had happened in one smooth motion, so fast Mira didn't see his hand move. The other man went rigid. Clive's smirk collapsed into fear. Ronan's eyes were the coldest thing Mira had ever seen. Hard, grey, unblinking, she's my bride. The words hung in the air, burning hotter than the sun. Mira's basket slipped from her hands, herbs scattering into the dust. Bride. Clive stared, stunned. You heard me, Ronan said, voice low and lethal. Now get off my land. Clyde's jaw worked like he wanted to spit, but the Colt aimed at his heart convinced him otherwise. He backed toward his horse slowly, palms raised. Ain't right, Ronan, he muttered. Ain't natural. Ronan didn't blink. Your opinion ain't asked. Clive swung into the saddle, face twisted in anger and humiliation. This ain't over. Sure it is, Ronan said. And it ended the second you stepped foot off my land. The men rode off, leaving a storm of dust behind them. Silence followed. A long, heavy silence. Mira stood rooted, heart hammering under her ribs. Ronan holstered his Colt and walked back to the stable as if nothing had happened, but the tension in his shoulders said plenty. She followed him, her breath shaky. What did you say? She finally whispered. He didn't turn, didn't speak. Ronan, her voice broke. Why did you call me your bride? At last he faced her. His eyes weren't cold now. They were something else. Something storming, something breaking. Mirora, he said, voice rough. I didn't say it to save you. He stepped toward her, slow, deliberate. I said it because it was already true. A soft breath escaped her lips. He closed the rest of the distance in 2 long strides. His hands lifted, not grabbing, not demanding, but cupping her face with a gentleness that made her knees weaken. Mira, he didn't finish her name. Their mouths met in a fierce, hungry kiss. A kiss fueled by months of loneliness and weeks of quiet yearning. His hands trembled against her skin, her fingers clenched in the fabric of his shirt. It wasn't polite. It wasn't careful. It was 2 wounded souls cracking open in the same moment. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathless, foreheads pressed together. Later, in the soft glow of lamplight, they came together in his narrow bed, not in wild passion, but in fragile honesty. Every touch felt like breaking and mending at once. Mira traced the old scars on his shoulders. Ronan kissed the places on her back where the world had once left its mark. In the quiet afterward, Mira lay with her head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady, warm, grounding. For the first time in her life, she felt claimed in a way that wasn't ownership but belonging. For the first time in years, Ronan felt alive in a way that wasn't pain but home. She fell asleep like that, wrapped in his arms. But morning brought a cold truth. She woke alone. Panic shot through her chest so fast she couldn't breathe. She sat up, clutching the blanket, scanning the empty room. He'd left, taken what he wanted. Her heart dropped until she saw the handkerchief on the crate beside her, folded, waiting. She opened it with shaking fingers. 4 heavy gold coins gleamed inside. It wasn't payment. It was a vow, a silent promise, a bride price. Everything inside her went still, but Harmony Ridge, the closest town, was already rumbling with poison. Ronan's defiance spread like wildfire, and when prideful men tell stories, they twist them. Soon, the tale reached the church steps in the general store. Soon, whispers sharpened to spears. Soon, righteous folk decided a colored girl in a white man's bed was an offense worth correcting, and 3 of them climbed into a buckboard with judgment burning hot in their eyes. They came not with fire, but with condemnation and a mission to shame Ronan Hale into undoing what they believed he had ruined. The buckboard rattled up Ronan's trail just past midday. Dust rose behind the wheels like a warning cloud. Mira saw it first from the porch, her heart seizing in her chest. Reverend Talbot, Widow Craw, and Mr. Talbot, Widow Crenshaw, and Mr. Talbot, Widow Crenshaw, Alden, the general store owner, people who acted like they held the weight of the whole county's righteousness. Mira stepped back into the cabin before they saw her, her breath shivering inside her ribs. Ronan set down the rifle he'd been oiling, his expression hardened like cooling iron. He moved to the doorway and braced one shoulder against the frame. The buckboard jerked to a stop. Reverend Talbot climbed down, soft hands clutching a worn Bible he rarely opened outside of scolding. Ronan, he said, in a syrupy voice meant to sound concerned. We've come to you as neighbors. Ronan didn't move. State your business. Widow Crenshaw stepped forward, her black dress stiff as armor. It's about your home, she said sharply, and the memory of your Martha, a pure-hearted woman who deserves better than what's being said in town. Mira flinched, hidden just inside the shadows. Mr. Alden cleared his throat. Folks are talking, Ronan, about a girl you got living here, saying things that don't sit right with God or man. Ronan's jaw flexed. My home is my concern. Reverend Talbot shook his head. Sin spreads. The community bears the cost. A man to fill in the memory of his white wife by taking in a girl like that. Ronan straightened from the doorframe. Danger rolled off him like heat. Widow Crenshaw lifted her chin. Send her away, Ronan. Cleanse your house. Restore your dignity. That is what we are here to ask. No expect. Inside the cabin, Mira pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Every word landed like a blow. Creature, stain, burden. She had heard it her whole life, but hearing it here, after building something so fragile and precious, cut deeper than any knife. Ronan's voice dropped to a quiet, deadly rumble. My house is clean. Mr. Alden blanched. Ronan, don't be foolish. People are saying you enough. Ronan stepped forward, blocking the doorway with his whole body. This is the last time I say it. Leave. The widow opened her mouth, but the look in Ronan's eyes froze her. The three stiffened, then hurried back to their buckboard, hissing and didn't whispers as they went. The wagon rolled away. The silence left behind was worse than their words. Mira leaned against the wall, shaking. Ronan closed the door gently but firmly, the echo like a shot in the quiet house. For a long time neither spoke. That evening supper tasted like ashes. Ronan ate little. Mira barely swallowed at all. The cabin felt smaller, the air heavier. Ronan sat by the fireplace, his shoulders bowed, not in defeat, but in a sorrow she hadn't seen before. Mira watched him, her heart bruising inside her chest. This was her fault. Every insult, every judgment, every blow aimed at him came from her presence. Her love was hurting the only man who had ever treated her like she mattered. When he finally went to sleep, his breath uneven, his face drawn, she made her decision. She waited until his breathing deepened. Then she rose quietly, packing her spare dress, her small knife, and keeping the 4 gold coins only because without them she would starve before reaching the next town. She paused beside his bed. The lamplight flickered across his sleeping face, softening the hard lines grief had carved. Her hand trembled inches from touching him. Goodbye, she whispered, though her heart cracked on the word. She slipped out into the cold pre-dawn air, closing the door without a sound. Ronan woke to absence. Cold, hollow, wrong. He sat up sharply, scanning the cabin. Mira's caught empty, her bundle gone, his throat closed. No, he stumbled into his boots and shirt, not bothering with buttons. Panic choked his breath as he burst out the door and into the weak morning light. Her footprints led away from the cabin toward Harmony Ridge. He saddled his mare with shaking hands, and then he rode. He rode like a man who had nothing left to lose. Dust flying behind him, eyes burning against the wind. He passed the creek bed, the split trail, the rocks she might have stumbled over. He passed everything except the fear pounding inside him. When he reached Harmony Ridge, he didn't slow, horses skittered out of his way. Townsfolk stared as he tore down the main street, jaw locked, eyes wild. He found her in the last place he expected, a dim little Chinese eyrie that smelled of broth and ginger. She stood before an old proprietor, wringing a rag between her hands, her shoulders slumped with the feet. I can wash dishes, she was saying softly. I work hard, my baby. Her voice broke. Please, Mira. His voice cracked across the room. She froze, turned. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. They'll take everything from you. Your honor, your wife's memory. He strode toward her, each step fueled by fear and desperation. Mirora, he said, voice shaking. Let them take it. She stared, stunned. Ronan, I don't need their honor. He reached her, gripping her arms, not harshly, but like a drowning man holding on to the last solid thing in the world. I need you. The entire room went silent. Mira collapsed into him, sobbing into his chest. He wrapped her up, holding her with a gentleness that hurt more than any cruelty she had ever known. When they walked out of the little eyrie, they walked side by side for the first time together. Their next stop was the county courthouse, a small clapboard building smelling of ink and dust. Judge Thomason sat behind a high desk, spectacles perched on his nose. Ronan set his hat down firmly. We are here for a marriage license. Judge Thomason blinked, looked at Mira, then back at Ronan. You know the law, the judge said flatly. Section 12. No marriage between a white man and a colored woman stands in this territory. Mira's breath hitched. Ronan's jaw flexed, but he didn't look away. We want a license. And I cannot give it, the judge replied, sharp and final. What you want is illegal, impossible. He lifted his pen again, dismissing them with a flick of his eyes. Ronan took Mira's hand and let her out. Outside, the sun felt harsher than before. Back at the cabin, Mira finally broke. She sank onto her cot and wept. quiet, shaking sobs that tore through the small room. Ronan knelt beside her, lifting her face into his rough palms. "Mira," he whispered. "Don't you ever say you wish you were white," but he shut his eyes, forehead resting gently against hers. "You took a house filled with ghosts and breathed life back into it. You brought me back from a grave I dug myself into. What shade of skin could ever measure that?" His voice trembled. "You are the woman I love, that's the truth of it." Her breath shuddered, tears softened, and in that broken, beautiful quiet, a new resolve formed. A few days later, as the sun dipped low, Ronan lit a lantern outside the cabin door and turned to Mira. "We'll have our wedding," he said simply, "our way." The open prairie became their church. 2 Ute elders stood witness, silent and dignified. Mira wore her mended calico dress and wild flowers braided in her hair. Ronan wore a clean shirt and the expression of a man finally stepping into his own life. He took her hands before this land and sky. "I take you as my wife." And she answered, voice trembling but true, "My heart is your heart, my life is your life." No law could have been stronger. That night they belonged to each other fully, without fear, without hiding, without shame. 2 souls who had walked through fire and found home in the ashes. Their wedding changed everything and nothing at all. The next morning the prairie looked the same. The horses grazed in their quiet corner. The sun rose over the ridge in its slow golden climb. Warmer, brighter, claimed. Mira woke before dawn, her cheek resting against Ronan's shoulder. The steady rise and fall of his breath felt like a promise. His arm lay wrapped around her waist, strong even in sleep. For a long moment she simply listened, letting the quiet truth settle inside her. She had a husband, she had a home, she had a name spoken with love, but life on the frontier didn't allow long moments of stillness. Within days, the world reminded them how fragile happiness could be. The fire came without warning, a moonless night, as still as a held breath, grass dry as old paper. Mira woke first, her nose twitching at the faint sting of smoke. At first she thought it was the hearth, but the fire had long since died down. She shook Ronan gently. "Ronan, something's wrong." He sat up instantly, instincts sharpened by years alone. His nostrils flared, his eyes hardened. Smoke too strong, too close. He threw the door open. The night outside burned. A wall of fire raced toward their homestead, turning the prairie into a blaze of orange teeth. The flames moved like a living creature, fast, deliberate, hungry. Mira's heart slammed against her ribs. "They said it," Ronan rasped. "This ain't lightning." They had no time to think. "The horses," Mira cried. Ronan sprinted to the corral, shouting and waving his arms, driving every terrified animal toward the creek bed. Their hooves thundered past Mira as she shielded her face from the heat. But then she remembered the shed, the chest, her mother's locket, the seeds she'd saved for spring. Everything they needed to start again. She ran. "Mira," Ronan bellowed, "leave it," but she didn't stop. Smoke clawed her eyes as she wrenched the shed door open. Flames licked the walls. The wooden roof crackled overhead. She stumbled inside, found the chest by memory, and dragged it toward the exit. A burning beam collapsed in front of the doorway. "Mira," Ronan screamed, tore through the fire. He plunged toward her without hesitation, shirt catching sparks, skin blistering instantly. He hurled his shoulder against the burning timber. His hands seized the smoking wood, pushing, heaving, refusing to let it own him. With a roar of effort, he shoved it aside. "Go," he yelled. She ran. He shoved her from behind, stumbling after her as the shed collapsed in a shower of sparks. They fell to their knees in the open dirt, coughing, gasping, clutching each other. Behind them, their shed crumpled into ash. The cabin followed, walls cracking, roof sinking into itself, flames devouring everything they had built together. Mira buried her face in Ronan's shoulder, shaking. Ronan held her tightly with his good arm, painting across the burns on his other hand, but he didn't loosen his grip. All night they watched their life burn together. When dawn came, the world was gray and still. The cabin was gone. The stable gone, the shed gone, the fields charred to black dust. Only the tall stone chimney stood, lonely and stubborn against the ruined land. Mira's breath caught when she saw Ronan's wrapped, blistered hand. "You saved me," she whispered. Ronan shook his head. "We save each other." And beside the chimney, miraculously untouched, the small adobe baking oven Mira had repaired sat like a stubborn survivor of its own. It felt like a sign. Help came from unexpected places. An old rancher named Sila's Weaver rumbled down their trail with a wagon full of lumber. "Had this sitting around," he grunted. "Figure you need it more and I do." He didn't wait for thanks. The next day, a basket of bread and smoked ham appeared at the end of their trail. No note, then a crate of chickens, then a bolt of wool. Not apologies, not courage, just kindness. Quiet and anonymous from those who still had hearts not hardened by hate. But kindness wasn't enough to mend what Harmony Ridge had broken. Ronan and Mira didn't rebuild on that burned land. Too many ghosts. Too much cruelty woven into the soil. They sold the scorched property for whatever passing speculator would pay, loaded their few saved belongings into Silas's wagon, and left as the sun rose behind them. They didn't look back. They traveled west until the land changed. Red earth giving way to pale desert and big sky. Mountains rose in the distance like blue giants, and tucked in a valley between ridge and river, they found a raw young settlement called Redemption. It felt right. A place where no one asked where you came from, only whether you could work. They bought a derelict adobe building with cracked walls and a sagging roof. Ronan rebuilt the structure with the burned strength of a man who refused to be defeated. Mira plastered the walls smooth and warm, coaxing light into the spaces that felt too dark. When the wooden sign was hung above the door, it read the Hearthstone Kitchen. Mira's idea. Inside, 3 small tables waited. Outside, the smell of her cooking drifted into the dusty street. Miners came first, tired men with hungry eyes, then ranch hands with dust on their boots, then travelers passing through. They didn't care about Mira's skin. They cared that her bread was soft and warm, that her beans carried a smoky kick of her mother's spice, that Ronan always dealt fair with horse rentals at the small livery he kept behind the building. Ronan began to smile more. Mira began to hum when she cooked. A love ripened into something steady and quiet, like a lamp left burning through the night, casting gentle light on everything inside. And then one afternoon, a shadow filled the doorway. A young woman barely past girlhood stood clutching a thin baby against her chest. Her skin was deep brown, her dress threadbare, her eyes hollow with hunger and fear. "Ma'am," she whispered, "do you have any work, anything at all? My boy, he ain't eaten proper in days." Mira set her cloth aside and stepped close. She looked at the girl and saw herself. A lonely road, a cruel world, a baby's weight and a heart full of fear. Mira took the girl's trembling hand. "The first thing," she said softly, "is supper. After that, we'll find your place here." Tears filled the young woman's eyes as hope cracked through despair. Ronan watched from the doorway of the livery, a slow smile growing beneath his beard. He had seen this before, love turning strangers into family. That night, under sky crowded with stars, Ronan and Mira sat on the back porch of their new home. Sarah hummed a lullaby inside as her baby slept. Warm lamplight poured through the windows. The air smelled of cinnamon and cooling bread. Ronan wrapped an arm around Mira's shoulders. Her head rested against him, their fingers intertwined. They had lost everything once, but somehow together they had gained far more. The world was still harsh, still divided, still full of those who judged without knowing. But here, in this quiet corner of the West, a man and a woman who were never meant to belong anywhere had carved out a sanctuary of their own making. And in the soft glow of the Hearthstone Kitchen, they had